Again, my name's Steve Dandino. I'm the Executive Director of the Reinvention Collaborative and Associate Provost at Colorado State University. And on behalf of our consortium of research universities, both public and private, coast to coast, north to south, we're delighted you could join us for today's town hall entitled Critical Student Affairs Perspectives for 2021. And I am delighted that we have two of the leaders in the field to present to you today and to share their expertise and their experience. And I will allow them to provide more full introductions of themselves, but please know that we're joined by Dr. Blanche Hughes, who, for those of you familiar with the RC, know her as a board member, longtime board member of our consortium, as well as the namesake of the Lamborn Hughes Institute, a project we're very proud of, and has now in her 14th year as Vice President of Student Affairs at Colorado State University. We're also joined by Dr. Kevin P. Jackson, who's Vice President for Student Life, and in his 12th year in that role at Baylor University in Waco, Texas. So without further ado, thanks to both of you, Kevin and Blanche, for your willingness to be a part of this webinar. And let me turn the floor over to Dr. Hughes.
Thank you so much, Steve, for that introduction and for this opportunity to be able to talk with our colleagues today. As just adding to that brief introduction, I have been at Colorado State University for over 35 years in different positions. And so it's been a wonderful experience and pleasure to work at this university and to be able to grow and learn and continue to learn here. Just in terms of just a little personal things about me, I'm originally from Lexington, Kentucky, and went to school at a small liberal arts school in Richmond, Indiana called Earlham College. Worked there, found my love for student affairs in that experience, and ended up coming to Colorado State as a graduate student in our Student Affairs in Higher Ed grad program, and ended up staying for most of my career. And I have amazing staff, amazing colleagues, and we have amazing students at Colorado State University. And so it is my pleasure to be able to talk to you about some of the experiences that we've had and how we've been dealing with the crisis that we have before us. So thank you, and thank you for joining us. Kevin.
I too want to thank you, and depending on what time zone you're on, it's either good morning, good noon, or good afternoon. And glad to be here, glad to be a part of this conversation. And we want it to truly be a conversation where we engage with one another. As mentioned, I've been at Baylor 12 years now in a chief student life role. Before coming here, I was at Texas A&M for a number of years in student affairs work. And prior to that, I was at the University of Denver. So higher education, student life work has been my entire professional focus in life, and I have loved every minute of it. In the course of that career, I have led with and through three major crises. One at Texas A&M, one here at Baylor, and now this one, which is a global pandemic. So along the way, I've learned some things to do and things not to do. And today, I hope we'll be able to share that together. So if we'll go to the next slide, we're going to talk about adaptive leadership, or at least I am today in the first part, and this idea of becoming stronger from the experience of leading through a crisis. Next slide, please. Now, we all know 2020 has been a most unusual and challenging year. I could see you, all of you on the screen, you'd be raising your hand, shaking your head. And there are reasons for that, some that we're very aware of, right? We have tried to do something, or we have been doing something this year that hasn't been done in over 100 years, over a century. And that is open colleges and universities during a global pandemic. 1918 Spanish flu was the last time we tried to do something like this. In addition to that, there are other conditions at play that are impacting us. Our economic situation, we've been hit by a recession, job loss, some of which rivals the 1930 economic depression. And on top of that, we've had social unrest around racial justice issues that remind us of the 1960s, particularly 1969, and the civil rights events that have been occurring. So we have all these conditions at play at the same time, and we're all being affected by those, and we're all trying to lead through those. Next slide, please. So what Blanche and I'd like for you to do is to take a moment, just take a moment and think about, in this current season that we're in, what have we lost? What do we miss? What do we yearn for? What are those certain aspects of our personal and professional lives that we enjoyed before this year, particularly the pandemic hit? And we'd like for you to go into chat and just start listing those, sending them to us. Let us see what those are. Start submitting those. What are some of those areas of loss you have been experiencing? And Blanche, as they come in, if you want to just read some of those off.
Oh, yeah. So, wow, they're coming in. Personal connections, time with family, seeing colleagues in person, the beach, walking on campus, church, shaking someone's hand, meeting with students, ability to brainstorm effectively in person, dinners with friends, several things around hugs, the buzz of an active campus, in-time mentoring, just a sense of community, getting out of the office and away from your desk.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Boy, it's an amazing list, isn't it? And it just keeps
is.
coming in. It just keeps scrolling in front of us.
Mm-hmm.
And we all have this sense of loss, right? Personal loss, professional loss. You know, I know for me, a personal loss is being able to engage fully within our church. You know, we put all the protective practices in place. Many of us are doing the virtual online church service. And I feel really a deep sense of loss with my church community. What about you, Blanche?
You know, a lot of people in here, I noticed, put hugs. And that's one that there's so many losses, but I am a hugger and I really miss that. And I miss it, not just regular hugs, but, you know, I had a dear colleague who lost her mother to COVID and not being able to just give her a hug, right? So you forget, for me, that's been one of the biggest losses.
Yeah. Yeah, and I noticed in the chat where several people had close friends or loved ones that they lost. And our condolences, our heartfelt condolences do go out to you. Next slide, please. Now, also in this current season, we've been challenged to adapt in multiple areas of our lives, personal lives, professional lives. We've had to determine new and different ways to do things. So what we'd like to take now is just a moment using chat to provide for us some things that you've learned. What have you learned in this current crisis that we're in? Please. Seeing the answers coming in here. Blanche, are you seeing some?
I am, that we're being adaptable. We've learned
Yes.
how to adapt. Teamwork, leadership matters. What's essential? Adaptability, giving grace, that you can meet virtually and still be, you know, productive. Communication is essential. To connect with family in a different way. Flexibility, spending more time with your kids. Yeah, I bet some of you are becoming teachers again, right? Everyone can be a leader. Witness and self-care is essential. Dress codes may not be necessary. Just the top part, yes. being comfortable with ambiguity and making tough decisions. Students respond better in person. Women hold up the sky in every way, including parenting and institutions. Innovation can happen. Letting go of hard and fast plans is okay. Yeah, heightened awareness of how difficult life may be for those on the other end of the phone or Zoom. Mutual aid is necessary for strong communities. Online program can work. In some cases, Zoom has worked with small groups of students.
Wow.
Don't want to return to the old normal. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so many, again, I love this, Blanche, the participation that we're getting from those in the audience. This is fantastic. I know for myself, I've learned about collaboration. I thought I was collaborative in my leadership style. I thought as a division we were being collaborative, but I learned what true collaboration is about. I mean, when you look at having to bring forth understanding around a pandemic, which you don't truly understand. I mean, the information on this pandemic was just, and continues, right, to evolve very quickly. And trying to make those decisions with your colleagues, you learn very quickly that no one person has all the information, or as much as the information you need. It takes all of you working together. And we saw that over and over again here at Baylor, everything from testing to tracing to quarantining to isolating, delivering meals. You just go right down the list. It has been a Herculean effort, and the only way we've been able to do it is to do it by working more closely with one another in a collaborative way. Blanche, what about you? What have you learned?
Well, I learned a lot. I guess the thing that pops out for me the most is I learned a lot about myself. My work habits, my lack of paying attention to my house. When you're sitting at home and looking around and seeing dust that you never noticed before, or, just, and saying, wow, I have not connected. I have not connected to my home. I've not connected necessarily with family members from afar. I've been too busy. And I've taken those things for granted. So I think the big thing for me is, okay, what have you been doing with your life? And how's that going to look differently later, right? What am I learning that I'm going to take with me?
That's such good words, Blanche. Thank you for sharing those. And thanks to everyone who shared within the chat what they're learning. And it's so encouraging to read those responses and to know that we're out there learning new ways of doing life. And so I want to talk a little bit more about that. We'll go to the next slide. I want to share a framework with you. I mentioned crisis and leading through crises, and wanting to, one of our objectives today is hopefully to share with you in such a way that you can take some of this information back and utilize it with your staff or yourself or your family, or just put it into place so that you can be personally and professionally stronger, as well as you can help your team or your university be stronger. So here's a bit of a framework. There's a gentleman by the name of Ron Heifetz. He's out of Harvard. He studied this idea of crises and what he calls adaptive leadership. And so one of the things he tells us about a crisis, and this is going to resonate. I mean, we all could have written this, but it just kind of reaffirms some of what we've been experiencing. The conditions of a crisis, what are they? High stakes, high uncertainty, and high sense of urgency. Can you raise your hand on that one? Yeah. We've all been experiencing that, right? This idea of high stakes, man. This is, thanks, Michael, for the raised hand. This is high stakes. I mean, in many ways, and I don't want to come across disingenuous here, but this is life and death in many ways. I know a lot of our students are like, hey, it doesn't really affect me. I'm a younger person. Well, yes and no, it can, but certainly it can affect our staff, faculty, and others, or those who are in vulnerable categories. Man, so this is high stakes for our institutions. We're already in higher education suffering from some economic uncertainty. We said pricing ourselves out of the market, all these things, right? And not as accessible. And now with the economic downturn, high stakes, high uncertainty. My goodness, we were trying to make decisions with not even close information sometimes, or certainly information that was evolving so rapidly you were just scrambling to keep up with it. And then high sense of urgency. You bet. Right now, it's honest. We got to go. Time compression, all of that taking place. And I don't know about you, but over the break, I slept a lot. I slept more than I ever slept in my life. And finally, my wife looked at me and she said, well, Kevin, that's because you were exhausted. Exhausted. You were exhausted. And I think we could all resonate with that, right? So those are the conditions. Well, if those are the conditions, then what do we do? Well, Heifetz has a model he calls the 2 phases of crisis. The first phase is acute, and the second phase is adaptive. So we're going to take just a moment to look at these 2 phases. Next slide, please. So Heifetz says that the acute phase is its honest phase, and its survival phase. And in this phase, we're looking to stabilize the situation. We want to protect the organization. We want to try and maintain hope and confidence in the moment. A writer by the name of Todd Bolsinger describes this phase as the blizzard mentality. We're caught in a blizzard. This is survival mode. Okay. And then Heifetz goes on to say that is the first part of this. And it can, for some, be the only part of a crisis, unless you think in terms of how you come out of the crisis stronger than you came into it. And that's the thriving stage. And as leaders, we're all thinking right now, right? How can I be stronger? How can my team, my university be stronger from this experience? So in this phase, what Heifetz tells us we need to do is address the underlying issues and opportunities that we have not had the capability and our will to confront before the crisis. And this is more of the Ice Age mentality. It's not just a one-time thing. It's just not a one-time epidemic that's going to eventually pass and we'll go back to normal. No, we may be learning some things in this crisis that are really more about a shifting weather pattern that will be with us for some time, will be our new normal. Next slide, please. So what Todd Bolsinger tells us in these types of situations, we need to exercise adaptive leadership. We need to look at these underlying conditions and opportunities and begin to work with our organization in a way that we can move towards those, that we can address those. And so I'll share this quote with you before I hand off the baton to Blanche. And that is, adaptive leadership is not finding a new inspiring vision about reframing, or it's not about a new and inspiring vision, but it's about reframing an original or enduring vision of the organization that allows everyone to see a new, compelling future for their beloved organization that is worth the sacrifice and commitment. Our roles as leaders help our staff, help ourselves, help our staff reframe and focus in on our enduring vision of our organizations, right? Our mission, why we're here, and to do so in a way that helps people see this new compelling future for our institutions and help them feel it's worth the sacrifice. Blanche?
Hey, thank you, Kevin. Next slide, please. So, well, I'm going to take you back a little bit. And as we think about the lessons learned about the acute and adaptive leadership models, if some of you are like me, when you get on these webinars, if you're able to get on with everything else going on, and you maybe have another computer set up beside you where you, what we call multitasking, right? And so you're hearing things and you're multitasking and you're trying to do everything that you can to stay in this survival mode and get things done, right? What's on my to-do list? And what I'm gonna ask you to do is to stop, if you're doing that, and take a minute and take a moment and really think about where we're at right now, right? I think about our students, our traditional age students, 18, 22, 23 years old. And I think about how they must be feeling as they look at our world and our country right now and thinking, what the heck, right? Like, do I have a future? So not only the pandemic, but the racial injustice that many of us knew existed, but now others are being awakened to that. Our political unrest, our systematic racism that's being challenged. It's like, if I were them, I would think, is the whole world coming apart? And at that same time, we're asking them to come to class, to do it remotely, to change their whole world, right? Their world has changed. And they have this future that is so unknown for them. But let's also think about us, because that's what we often don't do, is we don't focus on us as leaders of this institution and what is the impact on all of this for us. I remember when this happened in March, and we were planning, right? March, April, and I used to say, well, and everybody would say, when we get back to normal. Because in my experience anyway, in all the years that I've lived, I'm like, you know, this is a blip. We're gonna figure this out because that's what we do. By summer, we're gonna be good. You know, maybe we'll, be able to do our summer programming. And then summer came and all of a sudden, I had to come to the realization, hey, it's not getting back to normal. We need to start talking about a new normal because we have to get our head around things are changing. And before we could do that, we really have to stop and acknowledge the grief, the loss, which is what we asked you to share with us earlier, the pain, the anger, and how's that impacting our students, our staff, our faculty, and us. And I don't know about you, but I've had days where I have been grieving, anger, pain, hopelessness, and hope all in one day. And we wonder why we're tired, right? Just that. We have to do a better job as leaders of acknowledging how all of these things are different depending on your life experience, your marginalized identities or your identities, period. And what all of this, not only COVID, but everything and how it's impacting us. Also during the summer for our institution, when all of this was happening, we lost people and homes through major fire. And I know California had that same issue, right? It was like, come on, is there anything else that can happen? So that's the one thing that moving from normal to a new normal, because the new normal is this surviving thing, right? It also has required us to have so much more patience, flexibility, a little bit of grace, and finding joy, finding a reason to get out of bed in the morning, finding a reason to say, we can do this, right? Finding at least some sense of hope. And as leaders, if we can't do that, then how can we expect the people who work with us and our colleagues and others to be able to do that? And we have to focus on that. What Kevin mentioned, the previously unseen contributions of student affairs, and that goes back to what he was saying about us working together. Oh my goodness. I know more about wastewater and saliva than I ever wanted to know. And I won't even get into it with you, but it was also fascinating. But the researchers learned a lot more about students, the different types of students, where students live, what we do. And that also required great talking with each other, faculty, staff. It's like, if we're going to get through this, we're all going to have to work together. We're going to have to get out of our silos. We're going to have to respect the expertise of people and learn from each other and be patient with each other. I remember being in a meeting when we were talking about isolation and putting students in quarantine, which are housing and partnering with some of the other areas of the university to do that. And someone asked me in a meeting, oh, so are you going to feed them? And I remember trying to not make a face, because you can do that more and people can see it on, you know, on these, and thinking, wow, of course we're going to feed them. But that was just an example to me of how we don't really know a lot about what the rest of us do. And now we do. Now my colleagues who never knew what housing was, who never knew what Greek life was, they know now, right? And so that's a good thing, that we have to work together and give people, like I said, a little flexibility, a grace around how we learn from each other. And then the social norming piece. The other thing we said, if we're going to go to a new normal, we got to help people understand how to do that. And so we put together a social norming group that was made up of people from all over campus, including faculty who had expertise in that, staff and student affairs who had expertise in that, and communications people, 26 members of a committee. And it has been phenomenal in terms of the things that they have done and the conversations that have happened around that. Next slide, please. The other piece around assessment is really talking more with our students and saying, how are you doing? What do you need? How are we meeting your needs? And then who can do that? And faculty and staff, how are we meeting your needs? What is it we need to know? And making sure that we're trying to do that. And so the other piece of the new normal is the dual pandemic, which you've talked about. With everything going on, it all works together. And we see that, you know, things are going to be different. And so as we think about the pandemics and all of the racism, the systemic bias, the political unrest, how do we move forward, right? So these are things that have come up that we've seen in this survival mode of things we have to address. So what then is the next phase? And next slide, please. So new normal to what? And at first I was trying to think of a word, right? When I was putting this together, new normal to, and I couldn't think of it. So I decided that's a message right there. Let's just put question marks. We don't really know. We're in this adaptive phase now, moving into it of trying to thrive. And many of us did that, right? We survived, and now we're moving into spring and thinking about the future. And so what does that mean? What is our new normal? And what have we learned? Well, some things that I want to thank my leadership team, who I asked to give me some thoughts about this from their perspective. And I'm sure many of your staff would say the same thing. Hybrid service delivery. We've learned that that could work, that there are actually some things that technology can really help us to do better. When we first went to technology, they were telling me we had to go on Teams. I've heard them talk about Teams. In my head, I was wondering, what sports teams are they talking about? I quickly learned how to use Teams and Zoom, sort of. But it's giving students options. It's giving staff options. It's giving faculty options. I also teach. I teach a freshman class and a graduate course. In my freshman class, we met face-to-face fall semester, but there were times when students were in quarantine. So we also used Zoom, and we were able to do both things. Students could come to class and still participate. So again, where are we going to take that in terms of doing things differently? Student, staff, and faculty activism is increasing, at least on our campus. And I think if you look at data, you'll see that. What does that mean? We're being pushed to do things differently as leaders. How are we embracing that? New technologies, we talked about that, remote work flexibility, right? Most of us have been working at home. Some of us that are extroverts like me cannot wait to be back on campus. I just can tell you, I can't wait. I'm a person that would be lonely if I'm sitting in my office with the door shut. So other people, though, they found they're more effective and they can do their jobs just as well remote, or having flexibility too. I can meet people without running across campus now using Teams. So that's been something that we've learned. Viewing policies through lens of equity. All of this has helped to show the inequities that still exist in our, not in our society, in our universities. So what are we doing about that? How are we trying to make systemic change into the future that is going to be required of us? Next slide. Thank you. The disproportionate tax and labor, with all of these happening on the different faculty, staff, students, and even administrators at your institutions. One of that is, as a person of color and as a woman, I've had to come to terms with what has this meant for me, right? When I'm expected to be in front, leading a whole division, helping the university and want to do that, and the individual pain that I feel as an African-American woman, watching all the pain and the hurt and the bias and the racism that I have experienced all of my life, and seeing it right in front of me again and thinking, what the heck have we been doing for the last 60 years that I've been alive? And trying to figure that out while still needing to support my staff, and particularly staff of color and staff who really are allies and are in pain. And now add to that the political issues and disruption that we've also experienced. Again, many of us not being surprised about that, but many have been surprised. And how do we deal with all of that? And understanding, checking in with all of your staff and understanding that different people are experiencing this in different ways, and there's different types of responsibility and pain and stress that goes with that. And lastly, I think as we move to thrive in what's different and what we don't know, is that we have this amazing opportunity right now to make some very systemic changes in our institution, maybe in our work, in how we do our work, and how we do our work together in ways that we didn't do in the past. I remember that slide that Kevin did of the civil rights movement. I was 13 years old around that time, in those periods. I was a young teenager in Kentucky. And I remember literally thinking that the world was coming to an end, especially when you added the riots. And I thought, I didn't know if I had a future. And I think about that now, and I think through that pain and that work that all those folks did, we did have some systemic changes. Laws were changed. And yet here we are again now. We got to a point, and then we still couldn't go that next step to really make this a society and a world where all of us matter, right? And now we have this chance, I feel, to do that now, to really look at a new future that we can envision that includes all of us and our experiences. And as leaders, we have that responsibility to be more transparent and authentic and vulnerable, right? And continue to learn. We're being pushed right now, thank goodness. And even though it gets on my nerves sometimes and it causes me stress, I am learning. And if we need to embrace that, because if we're truly going to adapt and thrive as an organization, our organizations are going to look different, and they need to. And if they don't, shame on us. So, thank you. So Kevin, any comments about that before we open it up to everybody else?
Well, I almost broke out there at the end and said, preach it, Blanche. No, you are so spot on. I mean, this is a critical time in our history as a nation, a critical time in our history in higher education. And we as leaders are going to be judged on how well we have helped lead our institutions through to become stronger. So it's paramount to our work. And I think now if we could, we're starting to see the chats come in, the comments come in, and if we could start to lean in a little more and talk about, how do we do that? How do we lead forward? I mentioned learning a great deal about thinking I had been a collaborative leader before the pandemic and realizing that no, I had fallen short, woefully short. And not only had I fallen short, what I found was, it's the old adage, what happens at the top, how you lead at the top permeates its way through the organization. And so I had to own that. And I tried to be very open to feedback and begin to try and move forward in a different way. Listening, learning, and then leading. And I feel like we're making progress. We're certainly not there yet. We got more work to be done. But being open, you said so much, so well. One of the comments you made just struck me. We are in an environment that no one of us really gets, right? And so all of us are having to learn together and be vulnerable and open to that and authentic with that. So,
while we're waiting for folks to place their questions in the Q&A or the chat, whichever is folks are most comfortable doing that in, could I pose a question to you? I know it's a bit of a privilege to jump in like this and pose a question, but thank you both again for what you've offered. And you see in the chat, people are very appreciative. I was just wondering, maybe could we talk a little bit about the next week and 2 weeks, which is so, a crisis kind of moment for the country and for our students and for our campuses. Are you seeing, both of you, do you have some advice for us all around at different schools? What could we do to best cope with these circumstances?
Blanche, do you want to go first?
Sure. Again, as a university, we put together a committee of folks back in November with concern about what was going to happen during the election. Because again, that was one of those moments like, we don't know what will happen. And it turned out that because the results took such a long time, we didn't have some of the issues that we thought we might. And now we're wondering the same thing. But we put this committee together, and last semester we had workshops working with our faculty around democracy, and we really tried to help students to say, this is why it's important for you to vote, that your voice matters. How do you do these things? We work closely with our police department, who also worked with state and federal police to say, what are you hearing in the channels out there, that sometimes tell us when people are coming and what they might be planning. And so we're doing some of those same things right now. And those folks who are working so directly with our students. And I know on my campus and on your campuses that are working with students advising them, or in the, some of our cultural and resource centers, and in some other learning communities where they have a good relationship with students, checking in with them. How are you doing? What do you need? Do you want to have more meetings? Do you want, should we have some space available for you in case you need to have someone to talk with? So right now, I think that's what we're doing. It's still part of that big unknown. So that's what's coming to the top of my head.
Thank you, Blanche. Many of the steps you're taking resonate for us here at Baylor. One thing I would add, I mentioned in the opening, Baylor's a faith-based institution, and what that then does for us is we have a caring community value that we communicate from day one of being a part of our institution. Now, I know each person on this webinar also has a caring community, so please, I'm not trying to imply that only faith-based universities can do this, but it's very important to us that we communicate and continue to communicate our values here. And so whenever we face situations like this, we really lean into our faith community's values, and we talk about what it means to live those values out. And, the idea of how do we treat one another? And when the world around us is in chaos, where do we find our centeredness? And then how do we help our staff and our faculty and our students, our parents, our alumni, also find their centeredness as well? So lots of conversation, lots of dialogue, doing it in many of the ways that you've described, Blanche, and being present. That's the other part of it for us. And when the election was taking place, lots of staff out, being present across campus, interacting with students as we were able, given the nature of the pandemic. But that leadership presence is so very important.
Mm-hmm. Looks like there are two questions that Liz picked up. One was, where do you see higher education moving to due to all the challenges? I'm not sure, but I hope that we move to really pushing ourselves to be more open to hearing how we need to change, to really looking at our internal, the way we have been working up to this point, our policies, the way we connect, the way we talk with each other, who's in the room, who's not in the room, our hiring practice. I mean, like everything, right? I think that it's nothing new. There are things that most institutions have been pushed on to do, to have more equity, right? To have more diversity and inclusion. And what does that mean? And having conversations about that, and having that be the center of what we're doing. And what are the issues in the world that our researchers said they can help do? These are the things we already do, but how do we do that in such a way that it includes people who have, as I said before, who have not been included before? How do we do that in such a way where we don't know what the future is going to be? So what do we want it to be, and how do we work with each other to make that happen? Mm. I don't know, but I think it's going to be fascinating for us to stay in it and work with it, and not get back into, well, this is the way it worked before and it worked, so why should we change? Did it really? And who did it work for? Mm. Right? Just asking those questions. Well, it worked for me. Well, I can say, well, it didn't work for me. And it didn't work for that person over there. Not all of it. Some did, some didn't. What if we came together and figured out how it could work better for all of us, for all of our students, our faculty, and our staff? And that's going to make our institutions look differently.
So very well said. There was another step in the process that I was walking, Blanche and I were walking us through at the beginning. We talked about what have you lost? What have you learned? And then the other step is, once you talk about a crisis and its conditions and its phases, then a question you can then ask in the adaptive part of that is, what are the underlying conditions and issues that we are more acutely aware of now? And then once you begin to identify those, I mentioned one, we were not as collaborative as we thought we were. And then it's about the strength to say, what will we do about that moving forward? When you're in the acute phase, your tendency is to think, they use an emergency room example. You go to the emergency room, everybody comes in and it's an emergency. We got to work on this person right away. Got to. And so when they get the person stabilized, what does that person want to do who's been stabilized? They want to get their clothes and go home to the way it was before the emergency. And that's going to be human nature. That's going to be our tendency. I just want to go back. Now, I saw in the chat, some people were saying, I don't want to go back to that. I don't want to go back to that. And I understand it. There will be ideas or issues you don't want to go back to, but our human nature is to go to the familiar. So we're going to be in this phase of disequilibrium for a while as we try and go from what we were oriented to this disorientation we experienced, reorientation to what Blanche put before us as either new normal or 3 question marks, right? A reorientation that then leads us to where we're going to be in the future. And as leaders, we want to be stronger in the future. We want to identify the underlying issues we didn't have the capability or will, or both, to address before this pandemic and these other conditions that we've been facing. We want to be the kind of leaders that we can now address those. And we probably have to prioritize them because there's a bunch of them. And then have the will to lead the change that will address these underlying issues or capitalize on these opportunities.
I just popped in here because we are getting a lot of great questions, and I thought I'd read one for you to make it a little easier. What advice do you have for student affairs folks in situations where they were not deemed mission critical, quote unquote, throughout this pandemic? And secondly, how can we best help our colleagues on the academic side of the house understand the critical role student affairs plays as we think about life after the pandemic?
Blanche, you wanna start first? You want me to?
Sure. Well, I'll start and then obviously, you can add, and I may think of other things too. First of all, you got to be at the table. And so hopefully with the number of folks, and particularly part of the Reinvention Center that are on the academic side, hopefully doing things like this and helping you realize that we are there. We know students. That's our expertise, just like faculty's expertise might be chemistry teaching or the researcher's expertise. And having people at the table. I'm fortunate enough at CSU that I am part of our pandemic team, and that I have the absolute respect, of the leadership of my president, of our provost. I'm part of those conversations, and that helps us to be in the spaces with my team that we need to be in. And I can tell you that even working with researchers and having my dean of students on their subcommittee, right? And she needs to be there because they'll say, well, what about this? And she'll be able to say, no, actually students don't do it that way. This is not student behavior, but here are the things we can help you do. What is it you need from students? And let us help you to see how we can make that work. And that's been fabulous as we looked at our testing and those kinds of things. And I think when you have a chance to have one-on-one conversations or get a chance to talk with faculty and leaders in other areas of student affairs, to be able to understand what they do and respect and appreciate what they do. And then they need to have that same respect. And we are learning that. That's part of this learning each other and what we do is respecting the expertise that we have and knowing that we can still learn from other areas as well, that we don't have all the answers about students either. But if we take what we know and we take what some faculty know and we take what other folks around campus know, man, can we serve our students better.
So no, another very well said. And the only thing I'd add to that is to the part that talked about how do we help people understand that student affairs is more critical to the university operation. One of the things that happened here at Baylor was we do a annual survey of our incoming class when they about 4 to 6 weeks into their experience here. We ask them all kinds of questions. And as we begin to get the data back, some very marked differences, obviously, because we were in a very restricted mode in being able to do in-person interaction. But on engagement, involvement, the numbers were coming back, as you might expect, very low. Well, it wasn't a handful of weeks later, we started tracking fall to spring retention, right? Students registering to come back in the spring. And what did we see? We started to see our retention numbers starting to go down, not just for first-year students, but also for returning students. So we began to lean into it very hard. What's going on here? We think we know what's going on, but what's really going on? All the data came back, which supports the national data. If students don't feel engaged, if they don't still feel involved, they're not as inclined to be retained. So the beauty of this story is we quickly collaborated with our Student Success Center and created a coaching team that began to reach out to these students that we could identify who were rating their experiences below what we would think would be an acceptable level. And we began to walk alongside them even more, coach them up even more. And we saw our fall to spring retention rate begin to rise again. So in some ways, the proof is in the pudding. Student affairs is essential to the holistic education of our students. What we have to watch, though, is drawing a line and saying, hey, this is where student affairs stops and academia starts. No, it's got to be more holistic than that. And this pandemic is proving that to us.
Absolutely.
I think there's a lot of amens in our audience. Let me combine the questions together if I could. People are wondering to speak a little bit more about equity, because we know the stress of the situation affects people, and you've spoken to this, the unequal impact on our different student populations, and also the question of mental health in particular, because we know that's not an issue that anyone has a monopoly on. We all face those challenges. So could you say a little bit about that?
Kevin, you could go first.
Sure. The equity issue, talk about a learning curve. I'm a white male in my 60s, and my view of the world is impacted by all of that, right? And as much as I try to learn and understand what is going on around me, I have my limits, right? Because of my experiences. That's not an excuse, it's a reality, and I'm working hard to work through that. During the pandemic, the inequity of the effect of the pandemic has just been staggering. In our community, in our county, the disproportionality of the impact on our Hispanic and African American populations, it's sobering. And as you look into that, and as you work with healthcare officials about that, you just see the systematic oppression that has been there for centuries, and how it then impacts in something that you would look at initially and go, oh, it's a pandemic, everybody's going to be affected by it equally. Oh no, that is not what's happening. And you get into education and the fact our schools have had to close down, our K through 12s, and then do some online learning and then come back into the classroom, and all the inequity related to technology and the ability to work with students in their homes. So in so many ways, this pandemic has brought that to the fore in a way that you can draw no conclusion other than systematic racism has this insidious impact on all aspects of our society at all times, especially during this pandemic.
Yeah, and I think acknowledging it is institutions acknowledging it and talking about it, and talking to the people who are experiencing it, and with staff who are working with students, and hearing them and hearing what it is they're needing. And sometimes they're not hearing and say, I need you to do this, 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 and this. They're just like, I want it acknowledged, and then here are some things that maybe we could do or to think about. And it goes not just the individual services to students, which we need to do and hear them and provide that, but also as you know, we need to talk about what are the systemic things also that Kevin was talking about that we continually have to work on. And that's the core of our institutions, right? That's getting into asking those questions and that are really uncomfortable for people, particularly if they don't necessarily see that. They don't understand the equity issues because that hasn't been their experience. Or they're trying to, and they're in that learning mode. It's continuing to try to work on hearing, listening. What things do we as leaders, as Kevin said, what is it that we're holding that we have to let go of so that we can truly listen? And I'm part of that too, because it's a generational thing as well. And it's like, oh, and I'm like, well, let me hear you out. Now, how do we do that though? How do we still help the university grow, help it get better, help people at the university, particularly those who want to, and still move in the position that we forward that we need to. I don't have all the answers to that, but I think it starts with us being open about it, talking with people, talking to the people that we need to talk to who are experiencing it, staff, faculty who know this either from their life experience or from their research or from their work, and making sure they're part of any of these conversations that we're having.
You know, believe it or not, but come to our time together. And I just want to, on behalf of all the participants today and all the members of the Reinvention Collaborative and all our colleagues across the country, thank you both, Blanche and Kevin, for not only the benefit of your experience and expertise, but for modeling for us all how colleagues who are leaders, who are committed to values that we all aspire to and respect, how you work together, in order to, put what's important first, our students, our universities, the educational mission. And you both exemplify what I think many of us aspire to do. And we're grateful to you for your generosity today. And we look forward to, what's the way to put this? Taking responsibility now and going forward, once we acknowledge the problems, being part of the solution. And that's what we're all going to do together. So thank you again. Best luck to both of you and to all those who are joining us today as you begin this semester.
Thank you. Good luck.
Yes, thanks.
Hang in there and take care of yourselves and your families and friends.